Stress and anxiety is something that we all deal with in our everyday lives. Most of you who are students who are watching this channel are probably going through exam stress, considering your exams right around the corner. And stress can be extremely overwhelming for you. People have different ways of managing their stress. One such way of managing your stress could be through a technique called meditation. Through meditation, a person is able to achieve a state of mindfulness. Now, when a person achieves this state of mindfulness, they are more aware of their emotions, they're more in control of their emotions, their thinking, their movement, and they're more aware of the present moment experience. Because when a person is stressed, they tend to focus on the future. They tend to think of the past. Through mindfulness, a person is able to live in the present moment experience and be fully aware of not just themselves mentally, but even physically. And they feel that they're more in control of their thoughts, of their emotions, of their behaviors, of their actions. And when you're in control, you reduce your anxiety. Because anxiety and stress is caused by situations, by experiences where you feel you do not have control. So when you are more in control of yourself, of your body, of your emotions, of your cognitions, it is natural that your anxiety levels will be reduced. And this can be achieved through mindfulness meditation, which in turn allows you to perceive yourself in a more compassionate, non-judgmental, and overall positive way. And this is basically the study that Holzel will be looking into. It's on mindfulness and brain scans. It's the second new study in the biological approach and one of the 5 new ones that have been introduced in your 2024 syllabus. For the psychology being investigated, there are 2 key psychological terms which we should know. The first is localization of function. In very simple terms, localization of function is referring to different areas of the brain, different regions of the brain that are responsible for different activities. 2 particular brain regions that we are interested in this study are the hippocampus, which is associated with memory and emotion regulation, and the insula, which is associated with pain perception and overall awareness of the self and body, aspects that obviously are strongly linked to mindfulness. So that's why we're interested in these 2 particular regions of the brain. Now, obviously, we will also be looking at other regions of the brain, but these are the 2 ones that we're looking at specifically to see if mindfulness does have any impact in these regions. Now, how can we assess for any impact of mindfulness in these regions? In other words, how can we look for any brain activity within these regions? That can be achieved through a brain scanning technique that we call fMRI or MRI scans. fMRI is an abbreviation for functional magnetic resonance imaging. You do not need to know the whole form. You can just remember fMRI. And the difference between an fMRI and an MRI scan is that a regular MRI scan is a structural scan which gives you the structure of the brain, whereas an fMRI scan will allow us to determine activity in different areas of the brain. So if you want to look at any activity in the hippocampus, in the insula, or other regions, we can measure or observe that activity by using an fMRI brain scan. The other key term that is relevant to the study is something I alluded to earlier in the introduction of this video, mindfulness. Now, the definition of mindfulness is that it is a stress reduction technique that is used to improve your well-being. I said that it is a state, and this state is achieved through meditation, which aims at increasing awareness of the present moment experience. So, again, you are living in the present moment experience. It creates awareness of that. It allows you to be more in control of your emotions, of your thoughts. And once you achieve the state of mindfulness, you're allowed to look at yourself in a more compassionate way, in a more positive way, in a less judgmental way. So for that reason, it has a great impact in enhancing and improving your overall mental as well as physical well-being. Now, For the background of the study, we will look at the mindfulness meditation technique that is going to be used in the study. It is called MBSR. It is developed by this American professor, Kabat-Zinn. It includes an 8-week program, which involves a 2.5-hour weekly group meeting or 2.5-hour weekly group meetings, plus one 6.5-hour training day. Now, what happens during these group meetings? The individuals will go through training, mindfulness meditation training, which is based around 3 main techniques, which are body scanning, mindful yoga, and sitting meditation, the details of which will be discussed later on in this presentation. And not only are the participants going to be going through these different training techniques in these group meetings, but they're also encouraged to incorporate these in their everyday lives. Now, because this is a study from the biological approach, we obviously have to see the link between mindfulness and our physiology, right? Our biology. Like how does it affect us biologically or physically? So to understand that link, we have to understand the term gray matter and white matter. Now, gray matter is, these are biological terms. So many of you, obviously, who do not have any background in biology may find it difficult to understand these terms. So I'll try to break it down in as simple terms as I can. Gray matter is a tissue, or gray matter refers to tissues that contain billions of nerve cells that we call neurons. And neurons essentially pass signals from one neuron to the other, right? They pass signals which allow us to process information. And different types of gray matter have different roles. For example, some parts of gray matter are responsible for activities such as thinking, such as emotions, such as learning, whereas others are responsible for coordination of our muscle groups, for our movement, etc. So what gray matter essentially does is it plays a very important role in allowing us to think, to learn, to control our body, the sending and receiving of signals between these neurons. It helps us to just not only process information, but as a result of processing information, just make a better sense of the world around us. Okay. White matter, on the other hand, is bundles of nerve fibers that we call axons, which extend from one neuron to another. So you can kind of think of it as the connection from one neuron to the other, right? The neurons are the billions of neurons make up your gray matter, which are passing and receiving signals to one another. That's gray matter, which allows us to think and do all the other functions that I spoke about. But the way that these signals are passed, are sent or received from one neuron to the other is the role of white matter. So take the example of a light switch. You press the button, you press the switch, and the light comes on, right? Now, in order for that light to be turned on by that button, there was obviously a signal that was sent through the wire. Now, think of the wire or bundles of wires as these nerve fibers, which we call axons. So they're the ones that are carrying the signal through. They're the ones carrying the signal from the button, the switch, to the light that you need to be switched on. Apply that same analogy to your neurons in your brain. So when the signals are passing from one neuron to the other in order for information to be processed, it is done through white matter. It's done so through white matter, which is a bundle of nerve fibers that we call axons that are passing these signals through. So in very simple terms, gray matter is responsible for processing and thinking, while white matter makes sure that these processed signals are sent to the right places in the brain in order for us to make sense of the world around us. Okay. Now, in this study, the two areas of the brain that we are going to be focused on specifically are the hippocampus and the insula. Now, I don't remember if I've talked about these two, but just in case, I'll repeat myself if I have. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that is responsible for activities such as your memories and emotions, whereas the insula is responsible for pain perception and awareness of the self and body. Now, the reason why these two particular brain areas, regions are being focused on is because these are aspects of your um, these are aspects that will enhance or improve, or activities that will improve through mindfulness. So if someone is going through mindfulness meditation, it is natural for them to be able to regulate their emotions better, to be able to learn better, to be able to think more clearly, to be able to be more aware of themselves, of themselves physically and mentally. So if that is the result of mindfulness, then obviously there has to be some change in these areas, the hippocampus and the insula, because they are responsible for these functions. So the change that is happening, which I'm talking about, if there is any change in the hippocampus and insula due to mindfulness, the change I'm referring to is an increase in gray matter concentration. So previous studies have actually shown that people who are experienced meditators, let's say you are someone who's a very experienced meditator, who's been meditating for many years of your life, and you compare yourself to me, someone who has probably hardly ever meditated or done any form of mindfulness yoga or meditation in my life. If we were to compare our brains through using an fMRI brain scan, and we were to look at these areas, the hippocampus insula, we might find more gray matter concentration in your brain compared to mine. So that's basically what we're looking at in this study. Will mindfulness meditation enhance gray matter concentration in these areas, and as a result enhance the activities that these particular brain regions are responsible for? Thinking, learning, etc., awareness of yourself. So let's take a look at this illustration of a brain and a spinal cord. Now, gray matter and white matter are found in both areas, the brain and the spinal cord. We're not really interested in the gray matter in the spinal cord. We're more interested in how the gray matter concentration may increase in areas of the brain. Yes, we did talk about the hippocampus insula, but apart from these two areas, we will also see if mindfulness will enhance or increase gray matter concentration in any other region of the brain as well. Now, just looking at this diagram, this is an example of a brain. Let's say this is a cross-sectional view of the brain, which means if there's a brain placed in front of you and you're viewing it horizontally, and I were to slice the brain into half, which I call a sagittal slice, which is cutting it or slicing it from top to bottom, and I were to open it up and you were to look inside, then this is the view you would get, okay, cross-sectional view. And from this view, you would see that the outer edge of this particular area of the brain, where the area where the color is slightly darker, this is your gray matter. So gray matter in the brain is located on the outer edge of brain regions, whereas the inner area, you can see the lighter shade, that is white matter. For the spinal cord, it's the other way around. If you were to look at a cross-sectional view of the spinal cord, if you were to cut it open, you would see that the gray matter is actually located in the inner area of the spinal cord, whereas white matter is located on the outer area. But that's not relevant to our study because we are focusing more on, like I said, gray matter in the brain. Here's just a description of gray and white matter. You can read this in the notes that you can collect from me. Just contact me on the information, contact details I've given in the very first slide. You can even comment below on this video if you have any confusion about this entire description I've given so far and require more clarity. Please feel free to reach out to me. But moving on to the aim of the study. So to sum up everything we've done, which basically brings us to the aim, we want to identify or investigate changes in specific brain regions, such as the hippocampus and insula, but also the whole brain by comparing gray matter concentration before and after a mindfulness course. So, in very simple terms, to explain the aim, we want to see if there will be a change, an increase in gray matter concentration in certain areas of the brain, such as the hippocampus and insula, as well as perhaps other areas of the brain, um, before and after a mindfulness course. So we'll get an idea, a baseline of the gray matter concentration before beginning the course. And then after the 8-week period, which we'll find out in the experiment that it's an 8-week period, after this 8-week period is over, we will take a scan again of the brain after the mindfulness course is over, and we will see if the gray matter concentration has increased in specific brain regions as well as other areas of the brain from the baseline, from the very first scan that we took before starting the mindfulness course. It is an experiment. It's not specified if it is a lab or field because there are certain aspects of this experiment which are conducted in a controlled environment. For example, the brain scanning, um, whereas the rest of it is conducted in a naturalistic environment, such as the MBSR exercises and training, which are also required to incorporate in your everyday life, just while doing regular housework at home. So for that reason, we don't specifically refer to this as a lab or field experiment. So instead, we'll say it is just an experiment. The research method is experimental. And obviously, if there is an experiment being conducted, we have to have an IV and a DV. So a cause and effect relationship. And the main cause and effect relationship which we're looking at is one between the MBSR training and gray matter concentration. So will the MBSR mindfulness training lead to an increase in gray matter concentration? It is a longitudinal study, which is a study done on the same group of participants over a long time period. In this case, an 8-week period. So the participants are going to be tested before the intervention. Intervention over here refers to the exercise, the mindfulness training, and then after. So previous studies have been conducted, but on the same aim, but those were cross-sectional studies. Now, the difference between a cross-sectional study and a longitudinal study is that a cross-sectional study is done on different groups. So I would compare the gray matter concentration of one group at the beginning of my study for, let's say, a couple of months to another group and their gray matter concentration a few months later. So we're not really comparing the same brain. It would make more sense if you're comparing changes in gray matter concentration in the same person's brain from the beginning to the end of the experiment. So that's the difference between a longitudinal and a cross-sectional study. Okay, the participants remain the same in a longitudinal study. So you get to understand the development of any changes in the participants' behavior, emotions, cognitions, brain activity over time. There's also correlational aspect to the study where we are testing for a relationship in the time spent on mindfulness exercises and increase in gray matter concentration. So if you spend more time engaging in these mindfulness exercises, will that also in turn be positively related to an increase in gray matter concentration? And lastly, it's a self-report. This questionnaire will be used. It's a closed-ended questionnaire with a rating scale, as well as a Likert scale or a Likert scale. A Likert or a Likert scale is a scale with statements such as agree, disagree. And the name of this questionnaire is the 5 Facets of Mindfulness Questionnaire, the FFMQ. We will look at what this is when we get into the procedure. The independent variable, the main IV, is whether participants were in the experimental group or the control group. If you're in the experimental group, you are receiving MBSR mindfulness training. If you're in the control group, you are not. However, the control group does match the experimental group. There is no real difference in terms of education, age, or other factors. So they are quite similar in terms of their overall factors. But the reason they're considered a control group is because they are not going to be going through this mindfulness training during this 8-week period. They will go through it later on. So they're somewhat of a wait list, which is why we call them a wait list control group. So they're not going to go through the training during this period, but they will after this experiment is over. The second IV is the data collection time. We'll collect data at the beginning of the study and at the end of the study after 8 weeks. The DV will be gray matter concentration in specific brain regions. And this will be measured through a technique called VBM. I'm just giving you the short form, VBM. VBM is a technique used in fMRI brain scans that helps us distinguish between gray matter and white matter. And the second dependent variable would be the scores on the FFMQ questionnaire. Okay, they'll take it after the what do you call it? The mindfulness program is over, and we'll see if there's any increase in different aspects of mindfulness with respect to each participant. Independent measures designed because you're either in the experimental condition or control condition, so different participants in different levels of the IV, and it is an opportunity sample. Speaking of the sample, there were 35 initially, but 2 participants withdrew. Um, it's mentioned that they felt uncomfortable because if any one of you has ever been inside an fMRI machine, it can be a little claustrophobic. It's basically this machine where you're lying down on the bed and there's this big round tube around you which is scanning your brain and you're required to remain still. And at times people can feel like they're in a very closed claustrophobic space. So for that reason, 2 participants were feeling uncomfortable and they decided to remove themselves from the study, which leaves us with 33 participants who are right-handed. Reason for choosing right-handed participants is because we are focusing on, we want to focus more on gray matter concentration in the left hippocampus. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it's pretty interesting. If you're right-handed, you are left-brained, and if you're left-handed, you're right-brained. So if you're a right-handed individual, then the left side of your brain is perhaps more physiologically reactive. So during the brain scan, it'll help us to look at brain activity within the left hippocampus more clearly. Participants are physically and mentally healthy, aged 25 to 55 years. They were recruited from 4 MBSR courses that were held at the Center for Mindfulness at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in the US. They enrolled to help with stress reduction, either because they had chosen to attend the course or they had been referred by their doctor. So these are people who are going through stress, and they chose to attend this course because they wanted to reduce the stress levels or because their doctor recommended this program to them because they were going through stress. Um, Participants were included in the study if they self-reported as physically and psychologically healthy and were not taking any medication. Now, there was a further inclusion criteria, which basically means if you do not meet these 4 criteria, then you cannot take part in the study. The first one is you should not have taken any meditation classes in the past 6 months. So if you're attending the study within the past 6 months prior to the time that the study is being conducted, you could not have taken any meditation class. If you have taken meditation classes in your life, you can take a maximum of 10 during your entire lifetime for you to be part of this study, and no more than 4 within the past 5 years. So we are essentially looking for people who are considered non-meditators, because those who are regular meditators, we'll expect that they would naturally have higher levels of gray matter concentration. So we're looking at people who are considered to be non-meditators. No contradictions for MRI scanning, which means, like I said, if you have claustrophobia, if you're afraid of closed, tight spaces, then this is not a study for you. And that's, again, one reason why 2 of the participants might have withdrawn from the study. And metallic implants. So if you have any metallic implants, any metal rods in your body, then that would interfere with the scanning. So you would not be able to participate in the study. And lastly, you have to be committed to the study. You need to commit to attending all 8 classes and complete the homework that will be given to you as well on a daily basis. The homework essentially involves you practicing these exercises that you will learn in your everyday routine. So, for example, washing, doing housework, etc., you'll be required to incorporate whatever techniques you learned of mindfulness in your everyday life. So, a question could come about this inclusion criteria, so you should know these 4 points. Initially, like I said, the sample consisted of 8 males and 10 females, and this fell to 6 males and 10 females as 2 males left after the first MRI session due to discomfort. So this over here, I'm talking about the experimental group, okay, the ones who are receiving the MBSR. The remaining sample had a mean of age of 38 years, included 13 Caucasian, 1 Asian, 1 African American, 1 multi-ethnic participant. Are you required to know these specific details of the sample? Yes, you are. They could ask you a very annoying 1-mark question on this. And not just that, it can help you elaborate on your generalizability point as well, because this is showing that it is a relatively diverse sample. Average age of, sorry, not average age, average education of 17.7 years. Now let's look at the control group. 11 males, 6 females, age 39 on average, similar average education period of 17 years. So, as I said earlier, it's a very similar sample to the experimental group. 13 Caucasians, 2 Asians, 2 African Americans, and 1 Hispanic participant. Um, and again, both the MBSR and the control group, they did not differ in terms of age or education, but because they met the same eligibility criteria as the experimental group, they would eventually receive the MBSR training, but not during the time of the study. So going back to the earlier point I made of them being referred to as a waitlist control group. All participants have given written consent, so informed consent is being followed. And just as an incentive to participate, all participants are also receiving a discounted MBSR course fee for their participation. Now, talking about the FFMQ questionnaire, this is what it looks like. These are just 5 items from the overall 39. And it is a psychometric tool. It's a tool to assess different aspects of mindfulness that apply to you. It includes 39 items in total, and I've given examples of 5 over here. And these 39 items are assessing 5 aspects or 5 facets of mindfulness, which are describing, um, acting on awareness, I think it is, non-reactivity, and non-judging. Um, and the participant has to rate each of these 39 statements, these 39 items that are assessing these 5 aspects of mindfulness from a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never or very true, very rarely true, and 5 being very often or always true. Now, there is a technique being used in this questionnaire called reverse scoring. Reverse scoring basically means that this statement of very often or always true will not always be rated 5. So sometimes they'll reverse it, which means 1 could be very often or always true, and 5 could be never or very rarely true. And why are they doing this concept of reverse scoring? It depends on the statement. And we'll look at a few examples to help you understand. So the 5 aspects of this questionnaire of mindfulness that are being assessed are observing. Observing refers to just attending to or noticing internal as well as external stimuli, just being very aware of your thoughts, of external sensations, smells, sounds. So just having a sense of awareness and observing aspects around you. For example, a statement on observing could be, when I'm walking, I deliberately notice the sensations of my body moving, right? So you're aware of these sensations that your body is going through when you move. Now, someone who is mindful will probably rate 5 or 4, which is very often always true. Someone who is not very mindful, has low levels of mindfulness, would rate this as a 1 or 2, which is never or very rarely true or rarely true. Then we have the second facet, which is describing. Now, describing is mentally labeling these observations that you're having with words. For example, a question or a statement on describing could be, I'm good at finding words to describe my feelings. Again, someone who is mindful would say very often or always true, which is a 5. Someone who is not very mindful would be rating this a 1 or 2, which is never or very rarely true. The third facet is acting with awareness, which is being attentive to current situations, current actions, rather than responding absent-mindedly. So you are responding with more awareness, more focus, rather than just responding without any real focus or absent-minded. You're just not showing any absent-mindedness then. An example of this could be, when I do things, my mind wanders off and I am easily distracted. Now, for a statement like this, when I do things, my mind wanders off and I'm easily distracted. For this, the scoring would be reverse scored. Because now, if you were to say very often or always true, which means that you are saying that, yes, my mind always wanders and I'm easily distracted, then by giving a score of 5 for saying very often or very true means that you are not someone mindful. So in this case, the option of very often or always true would not be rated 5, but would be rated 1, because 1 means a lower score in mindfulness. Someone who is mindful would say, no, I do not always, my mind does not wander off and I'm not easily distracted. So they would pick the option for the statement, never or very rarely true, which in this case would be rated a 5 rather than a 1. So this is what the concept of reverse scoring means. In the next slide, there are a few more examples which we'll look at. Let's talk about non-judging. Non-judging is not evaluating sensations, cognitions, or emotions. An example of a statement of this is, I criticize myself for having irrational or inappropriate emotions. So non-judging basically means do not be very critical of yourself. Do not evaluate your emotions, cognitions in a very negative manner. Do not judge yourself too much. And non-reactivity means allowing your thoughts and feelings to drift in and drift out. Okay, so you're not reacting to your um, thoughts and your feelings. A statement for this is, I perceive my feelings and emotions without having to react to them. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more examples of how these could be reverse scored. So responses to the items are given on a 5-point Likert scale. 1 is never or very rarely true. 5 is very often or always true. A mindful participant would perhaps choose the option very often or always true, which is a rating of 5, for an item such as, I'm good at finding words to describe my feelings. However, some items are reverse scored because a mindful participant would select the option never or very rarely true, which in this case would be rated 5, for an item such as, I am easily distracted. In this case, the option of never or very rarely true would be given a score of 5 rather than 1, as this indicates a mindful response for this particular item. Okay, so in other words, a higher score in this questionnaire indicates a higher mindfulness score. So you are more mindful if you have a higher score in this particular questionnaire. So that's the purpose of reverse scoring. Now, 33 participants, but usable data was collected from 28 of them, 14 from the control and 14 from the experimental group. MRI scans were conducted for the experimental group 2 weeks before they had their first MBSR training. Now, how did the experimenters analyze the brain scans? This was done through 3D models that were created by taking sagittal slices, 128 of them. I told you what these were. It's basically taking a slice of the brain from the top to bottom. So scans were taken of different areas of the brain in terms of 128 sagittal slices. And then these pictures or these scans were then combined using a computer software to create a 3D version of the brain so that we can analyze the activity in different areas of the brain. And through a process called VBM, the scans allowed us to differentiate the gray matter from the white matter. So we're able to determine gray matter concentration in 2 regions of interest, ROI, which are the hippocampus and the insula. But not just these two, the overall brain as well. But the 2 main regions of interest, which I have mentioned multiple times, is the hippocampus and the insula. Now, the experimental group took part after this in an 8-weekly MBR session or 8 weekly MBR sessions, after which they completed this FFMQ questionnaire. Sessions took place at the Center for Mindfulness at Massachusetts University Medical School. Now, the experimental group was also given a 45-minute audio recording of their guided mindfulness exercises, which included the 3 techniques of body scan, yoga, and meditation, which they were required to follow or complete at home while engaging in everyday life experiences or exercises such as washing up, cleaning, taking a shower. So just doing everyday life stuff. When you're going through these things, you're required to just apply these exercises, just include body scanning, yoga, meditation, in your everyday life. And a 45-minute audio recording was provided to you to take back home to just kind of guide you and help you on how to do this. Further MRI scans were taken 2 weeks after the final MBSR training for the experimental group. So the first scan was taken 2 weeks before beginning it, and another scan was taken 2 weeks after the end of this 8-week MBSR training. So because it was an 8-week period, the difference in the duration from the first test, which is the pre-test scan, and the post-test scan was a period of 56 days, which is exactly 8 weeks. Now, the control group also took 2 scans, one at the beginning and one at the end of the study. It was 66 days apart, and they completed the FFMQ questionnaire once after the first scan and once again after the second scan. But they did not go through the MBSR training anytime during these 66 days. They just went through the scanning and they fill out the questionnaires. And the reason for this is because they're not going through any mindfulness exercises or any meditation training, mindfulness meditation training. During the 66-week period, we will look at their gray matter concentration at the beginning of this period and at the end of this period. And if their gray matter concentration has increased, if their FFMQ scores have increased, then that means that mindfulness is perhaps not responsible for gray matter concentration, because there is no reason for their gray matter concentrations to increase, at least not as much as the experimental group's gray matter concentration should increase, because they're going through mindfulness exercises during this period. These guys are not. So that's why we are getting a baseline of their gray matter concentration at the beginning of the study, and then once at the end. And we'll see, we are hoping it should stay pretty much the same or similar to what it is at the beginning. So that's the purpose of taking their scans. That's why they're essentially a control group. Now, what is body scanning, mindful yoga, sitting meditation, the 3 techniques that are going to be used in the MBSR training? We said that it is a 2.5-hour weekly group meetings will be conducted, plus one 6.5-hour training day, which involves 3 main techniques. Body scanning is a part or a technique of this meditation that involves slowly becoming aware of your sensations in each area of your body, which leads to an overall gradual awareness of the whole body and mind. So if you're going through body scanning, the body scanning mindfulness meditation technique, it would usually require you just lying down on a soft surface. It start by you having your feet away from one another, perhaps your palms facing the ceiling, the sky, just lying down in a position that makes you feel comfortable and relaxed. And you would be guided to breathe in and out, focus on your breathing. And as your breathing is flowing in different parts of your body, you're in a way scanning your entire body. You're becoming more aware of the sensations of your body. You're becoming more aware of the breathing that is in different parts of your body. And that allows you to just be more aware of your mind, of your entire body as a whole. Mindful yoga is just gentle stretching, coordinated slow movements and breathing with the focus on moment to moment experience. It allows you to be fully aware of the present moment, and it allows you to develop self-compassion, self-awareness, acceptance of your body's potential and limitations. And sitting meditation is a form of meditation where you are obviously sitting on either a soft cushion, your back is completely erect, you could be sitting on a chair, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And here also you are developing an awareness of the sensation of your breathing, and you are getting awareness of other sensory information such as sight, smell, touch, taste, emotions, all your senses. And this, again, also, just like the others, allows you to develop a slow and gradual awareness of all aspects of yourself, of your mind, of your body. So these are the 3 techniques that are going to be used, that are going to be, the participants are going to be going through during this MBSR training. Now, controls of the study, everyone's taking the same FFMQ questionnaire, once before, once after. It is scored on a standardized rating scale. All participants in the experimental group went through the exact same MBSR training for the same duration. The fMRI scans were standardized as well, always taken 2 weeks before the training and then 2 weeks after. If you want to know a point about controls or one aspect of reliability which is low or limited, you can say the time spent on mindfulness training for each individual was different, because remember, they have to go back home and they have to implement these exercises in their everyday lives. So how much time they spend on each is different from participant to participant. So that's a point about reliability, which is reducing reliability, which we'll obviously talk about in the evaluation. What are the results of the study now? So the experimental group had an average of 22.6 hours of MBSR exercises during this entire period, with a standard deviation of 6.3 hours. So some had more time spent on these exercises, some had less. So again, the point I was just talking about, some participants practiced considerably more than others. Overall, participants spent approximately 27 minutes per day on mindfulness homework during the course. Most of the time was spent on body scanning from the 3 techniques, almost twice as much as on the other 2, yoga and meditation, sitting meditation. There was no real correlation between any of these individual exercises though. So here's an example. The correlation coefficient between body scanning and sitting meditation was minus 0.26, which a negative correlation. So negative correlation means that if you do more body scanning, you'll do less sitting meditation. But how strong is that relationship? Almost non-existent. 0.26 is a very, very low and weak negative correlation. So only a 26% chance that if you are engaging in body scanning, more body scanning, you will engage in less sitting meditation. For yoga and sitting meditation, it was 0.49. So 49% chance that the more yoga you do, the more sitting meditation you will do, and vice versa. And for body scan in yoga, it was minus 0.042. So barely any relationship between these two. In terms of if you do one, more of one, will you do less of the other? So this suggests that different people prefer different exercises, but doing a lot of one particular exercise did not necessarily mean that they did a lot of the other 2. And this table is just giving you an idea of the minimum and maximum amount of minutes spent on each, as well as the average amount of minutes spent on each of the 3. You can try and remember these numbers. Could come useful for questions on data. Now let's look at any improvement in mindfulness. The FFNQ showed that the experimental group had a significant improvement in their scores when you compare to the pre-test scores and the post-test scores, specifically for 3 facets, 3 aspects: acting with awareness, observing, and non-judging. So the participants, when they compared the ratings from before the test began and after the test, their ratings in terms of these 3 aspects increased for the experimental group, a lot more than for the control group. However, they did not show any real improvement in the aspects of describing and non-reactivity. There was no real difference between the 2 groups, the experimental and the control group, at the start of the study, because we did say that they were similar in terms of education, age. They all met the same eligibility criteria. And for the control group, we did not see any changes in gray matter concentration between the 2 periods. So that's a good sign. So the gray matter concentration at the beginning of the study and the second scan 66 days later for the control group, there was no improvement or increase in gray matter concentration. So we can say that the increase in gray matter concentration for the experimental group is attributed to the mindfulness training, because at the beginning there was no real difference between the 2 groups. So the only reason there is a difference now in the gray matter concentration is, what is the only thing that is different? One group took MBSR training, the other did not. Now, with regards to gray matter changes, the experimental group, so one of the regions of interest was the hippocampus. And we did see a significant increase in gray matter concentration in the left hippocampus. But when you look at other areas of the brain, Here are some terms. I know they're difficult to learn, but if you can, try to remember them. The posterior cingulate cortex, the temporoparietal junction, and the cerebellum. All of these three are other areas of the brain that we looked at that were compared to the brains of the areas in the brains of the control group. And we found that these areas also saw an increase in gray matter concentration. So yes, our focus was on the insula and hippocampus, and the hippocampus did see an increase in gray matter concentration for the experimental group, but other areas such as these three also found an increase in gray matter concentration. Um, However, when looking at the insula, unlike previous research, we did not find any significant increase in gray matter concentration in this part of the brain. Previous research has shown that there has been increase in gray matter concentration in the insula following mindfulness meditation. But one reason perhaps why we did not see any real increase in gray matter concentration in the insula in this study is maybe because an 8-week period is not enough time. Perhaps if it was a longer study, they had spent more time on mindfulness, then maybe would have seen changes in gray matter concentration in the insula. Gray matter concentration was not correlated with the amount of time spent engaged in mindfulness exercises. So whether or not you're spending more or less time in engaging in these exercises, it did not really affect gray matter concentration. As long as you were doing it, it increased it, but it did not matter how much time spent. That did not really relate to increase or decrease in gray matter concentration. No parts of the brain showed decrease in gray matter concentration for the experimental group. However, the control group did show a decrease in a certain area called the posterior cingulate cortex. For the control group, we did see a slight decrease in gray matter concentration, but none were seen, none was observed for the experimental group. So, what are the conclusions then? Um, Changes in the ROI, for example, left hippocampus show that increased gray matter is due to mindfulness training after an 8-week period. They were observed in other areas of the brain as well. The hippocampus plays an important role in learning as well as memory. And during this MBSR course, some participants did go through learning experiences, which is why there was increase in gray matter concentration in the hippocampus because it's responsible for these functions. The study did not confirm any previous research findings related to the insula, however, like I discussed. But again, that's perhaps because changes in this region may require more than 8 weeks of practice. Evaluation, nature, nurture. Well, being a biological approach study, it is going to favor nature. I mean, we've seen so much evidence of changes in gray matter in areas of the brain that in turn is affecting your ability to learn, ability to focus better on yourself, be more self-aware, be more mentally and physically aware. So, a lot of evidence that supports the nature side. However, nurture can also be supported because participants went through an MBSR training program and they had to learn these techniques and they had to learn to apply it in their lives to deal with the stress that they may be going through, which would help them improve their well-being. For the individual situational debate, it is supporting the individual side. Participants chose their own exercises within the training. Some engaged more in, they preferred to engage more in body scanning compared to the other two. Some spent more time on the exercises compared to others. So, that was the individual side. However, the situational side can also be supported as all of them were in a situation where they were receiving MBSR training, which was the reason for their increase in gray matter concentration. However, those who were in a situation where they were not receiving this, i.e. the control group, they did not see any increase in gray matter concentration. So the situation of receiving or not receiving was the main reason for the change in gray matter concentration, which is going to be favoring the situational. Now, what is the application to everyday life of this study? It's pretty straightforward. People can use MBSR training to help reduce stress in their lives, to help improve their mental and physical well-being. Organizations can incorporate this training technique for their employees who may be experiencing stress at work. People can regulate their emotions and cognitions for a healthier level of cognitive functioning, psychological functioning by implementing MBSR and mindfulness exercises. So basically, even you and I can use this just to help us deal with our stress. You guys, students who are going through stress because of exams, because of studies, because of university applications, which you'll be going through a lot more next year, you could apply these techniques on yourself, go through this training, and it will help you reduce your stress and just be more mentally and physically self-aware. I believe there are some videos up on YouTube where these three techniques are being taught. So that you can find body scanning, sitting meditation, and mindfulness yoga on YouTube, which is being supervised by the professor who created this program. So I think it's available on YouTube. Evaluation. Reliability is obviously a strength, high levels of controls, standardized procedure. Just give examples of any of the controls, and you can go on to say that this makes it standardized, easy to replicate for reliability. Weakness, as I said earlier, the amount of time spent on the exercises was different from person to person. So that was not standardized. So that could lower the chances of replicating the study for reliability. Validity is a strength, control over confounding variables. Um, Participants were included who did not receive any previous mindfulness training within the last 6 months. So we're making sure that we are not including participants who are considered regular meditators, experienced meditators, because then they would naturally have higher levels of gray matter concentration. And so yeah, a lot of evidence to support the fact that confounding variables were controlled, which increases the validity. Um, what else? Well, it's an independent measures design, so no chances of order effects. Um, so that because I mean, it is naturally going to be independent measures because you're either receiving the training or you're not. Weakness is that because there is a self-report involved, the FFMQ, participants may give socially desirable responses. The ratings are also subjective. Um, so by rating something as 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, what they are trying to imply with their ratings may not necessarily be interpreted the same way by the researchers. So for example, if you're rating an item as 4, 4 in your mind might mean something very different to what the 4 means in the mind of the experimenter, even though there are statements associated with each rating, but they're still subjective. So that can lower the validity. And people may just give higher or lower ratings than what they actually are going through, maybe just to increase or decrease their scores. So they may give untruthful responses, socially desirable responses, which can lower the validity. In terms of generalizability, we can say it's a strength and weakness. It's quite diverse in terms of age, in terms of ethnicities, but the overall sample size is quite small. And it includes only right-handed individuals, so not applicable to left-handed people. Um, Average age is 17 years. Um, Not applicable to children, not applicable to people over the age of 55 or teenagers. So, and I believe there are also well, they are of different ethnicities, so I guess cultural differences may be applicable. Maybe you can apply to different cultures, but then again, even within the different ethnicities, there's not very large representation of each. Like I believe there was only 1 or 2 Asians, African Americans, Hispanic individuals, etc. So generalizability you can use as both a strength and weakness. Ecological validity is a strength. Because people were incorporating these exercises in their everyday lives. It is high in mundane realism. People do go for yoga. People do apply exercises, yoga exercises in their everyday lives to help them um, just be more mindful. But at the same time, there is scanning involved. fMRI scans were used. So that aspect would lower the ecological validity of the study. Ethics are a strength because participants were debriefed. 2 participants exercised their right to withdraw. Participants' personal information were not revealed, so confidentiality was maintained. They gave consent, written consent, I believe it was. They were protected from psychological harm because they made sure that participants who were claustrophobic or had any metallic objects were not included in the sample. However, there were 2 participants who did feel uncomfortable and left the study, so they might have gone through some psychological harm. But overall ethics, I would say, is a strength. Experimental design, I've already discussed the strengths and weaknesses. Strength is that you would not have any order effects, practice effects, but weakness is that there could be individual differences. Um, so, for example, it says here that it is possible that some participants may have chosen certain mindfulness exercises where they were exposed to a larger social group, and perhaps it was this interaction with others that led to improvement in well-being. So maybe they were not really improving on their well-being, their gray matter concentration levels were perhaps not improving because of the exercises, but rather because of their interaction with others. So, maybe that is one factor that could have played a role in them, in their, what do you call it, well-being improving. So that could obviously lower the validity. Some spent more time than others, so maybe that is a factor, but the results did show that that didn't really matter. Okay, it's a longitudinal study, so we have a lot of in-depth detailed data which is collected over a period of time. We're seeing how the data is developing for the same participants. So we're seeing their gray matter concentrations at the beginning of the study and at the end of the 8-week period. However, weakness is that participants can withdraw, because if you're doing a study on the same people over time, there is no guarantee that everyone will stay throughout. So, two people did withdraw. So when participants withdraw, we call it participant or sample attrition, which is when they exercise their right to withdraw, which is why one of the criteria was that we wanted them to state that they would be fully committed to this entire program. Self-report strengths, weaknesses, it's a close-ended self-report questionnaire, so quantitative data, it's standardized. Results can be compared from the beginning of the mindfulness intervention to the end to see how their FFMQ scores increase or decrease over time. But at the same time, people can give socially desirable responses, which can lower validity, and it's only close-ended, so it's not providing any qualitative data. So going to data, there's quantitative data, but not a lot of qualitative data. And lastly, the sampling method is opportunity. So participants are readily and easily available, as many of them were referred to the course by their doctors. But the problem with opportunity sample is they're usually from the same area, have similar characteristics, which can lower the generalizability. So with that, we conclude this entire study, and I hope it is helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will be back with the remaining studies hopefully very soon. So until next time, see you guys and take care.